Good morning, sir.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Just literally got like 3 clients in the last couple of weeks.
Nice. Very nice. Here, help me let people in. Here comes Greg.
Everybody is a panelist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gregular.
Irregular.
There's Alexa. There's Dennis. Wait, let's see it.
Oh, come on.
that was weak. That wasn't the normal Dennis stretch we're used to.
Too tired.
Too tired to stretch normally.
That's a sure sign of quarantine. At least you got up and got dressed. You're wearing a nice shirt today.
Yeah. Weather's warming up a little bit. I'm just having a hard time remembering what day it is.
Yeah, I know. I get that. All right, I'm going to attempt to go live on Facebook here. Let's see if it works this week. On a page. Let's see what happens. All right, so far so good. But last time I got this far and then it just didn't let me actually go live. But it looks like the blue button is active. Last time it was grayed out. I think we're in luck this week. Hold on. It's going. It's setting it up. Yeah, I think we're good. Let's see if I can find the live video. There should be one in the Facebook group. I see it live on the page. Yep, there it is. Beautiful. Let me just get the live feed from the page on my screen so I can watch for comments. Very nice. And guess what, folks? You ready for it? We are live. It's May 15th, 2020. Zoom in with Seth, David, and friends. That's me, by the way. And we've got an exciting program scheduled for you, planned for you for today. How to accelerate your accounting or bookkeeping practice. So we're going to dive into that. If you missed it last week because we weren't able to go live, I did post the recording as usual on our lovely website. So you can catch that there. Just go into nerdenterprises.com or new.nerdenterprises.com and go into Nerd Buzz and you'll find the Zoom in with Seth, David, and friends recordings. They're all there. So let me know, of course, if you ever have any trouble finding something, and I'll be happy to post links and get you there quickly. So letting people in, recording. Perfect, we're all set. So how to accelerate your business, your bookkeeping business success, right? Better title would be your accounting or bookkeeping business success, right? Either one. We're going broad here. And this was suggested, I forget, I want to say it might have been Sandy Leal or somebody like that who suggested this. Anyway, I had invited people to, to give me suggestions for topics to cover back in like December, and this was among them. And at first I thought about it and I said, it seems awfully broad. How do I cover that properly as I spill coffee all over myself? So that's part of why it took me a while to actually get this into the schedule, because I really wanted to think good and long and hard about what this really looked like. Because this could mean a lot of things, right? So, I thought about it, and I kind of said, okay, so if we're talking about accelerating an accounting or bookkeeping practice, what are we really talking about doing? Of course, it means, taking things to the next level, going better, stronger, faster, whatever you want to call it. And it could go a lot of ways, but I thought ultimately, how do we grow the business? How do we get closer to where we really want to be with our accounting or bookkeeping practice? And I thought about what would really drive that. And I came up with the following. Again, this could mean, if I had 10 of us write the curriculum for an hour lesson like this, I'd probably get 10 different angles on the subject. That's what made it kind of challenging for me, which of course I enjoy. And so the following question popped into my head while I was really sitting down and thinking about what I wanted to talk about today. And the question was this: how much attention are you willing to pay to your clients? Right? And think about that for a second. How much attention are you genuinely willing to pay to your clients? And one way that I kind of thought about how to define this for myself was as follows, because a lot of what I learned, I think, it stems from something that I got out of an interview I did years ago with Gary Vaynerchuk, when I asked him, where he got his inspiration from, who were his mentors. And his answer to me was that he gets his inspiration from his own clients, from his customers. And I thought that was really interesting. And so then, between that and other things, I've learned to kind of gauge my own behavior. How do I react? How do I find myself reacting, especially when I catch myself when I wasn't really conscious of it or thinking about it, right? And what I came up with under this context, again, how much attention am I willing to pay to my own clients? The next question that popped into my mind was, when one of my clients reaches out to me and says, hey, do you have time for a call? How do I sort of internally react to that? In other words, do I get annoyed that they're taking up more of my time? Or do I get excited about the opportunity to go help them? And if I'm being honest, more often than I'd care to admit, I probably find it annoying, at least at first, before I have to stop and remind myself, that I should be excited about this. I should be excited about and looking forward to the opportunity to work with my clients, to help them, not annoyed by the fact that they want my time. I should be glad that they're coming to me and not someone else for my help, right? But I think we lose sight of that a lot, especially when we get deep into the trenches and kind of caught up in our day-to-day. And so if it is the former, because the question again is, when they ask for your time, is it annoying or do you look forward to it, right? Ask yourself that question and answer it honestly, and take time. Don't answer it immediately. Take the time to honestly think about it. And if it is the former, if you do find it annoying, then the next thing that I came up with is that maybe we need to design a new accounting and bookkeeping service offering for you, in terms of what you're offering to your own clients, right? One that gets you excited to work with clients. More importantly, one that gets them excited to work with you. Because again, if your clients are annoying to you when they ask for your time, rest assured, no matter how good you are at covering your feelings up, whatever, they're going to feel it on some level. Even if it isn't conscious, I can promise you that they sense it coming from you, that you're hesitant and not excited about the opportunity to work with them and help them and find out what they actually need. And I'm sure we all go through this. I know I do, and I know plenty of people that I talk to, share that they experience something similar, in that, especially there are certain clients that typically when I get a text from them or I get an email from them, I cringe because I'm like, oh crap, what do they need now? Because there's certain clients that it's typically just not good. They're usually annoyed or upset or frustrated. But what I need to remind myself about in those instances, and I have to do this very consciously sometimes, is that this is an opportunity. Yes, they might be annoyed. They might even be annoyed directly with me, but scheduling that call with them, getting on the phone with them, getting on Zoom with them is my opportunity to turn that around. And then once I've turned that around, oftentimes, ironically, the best time to work with a client, the best time to sort of get them on board with you and whatever else you might be thinking you'd like to do with them, is right after you've just turned something around from a negative to a positive, because you've just taken them from feeling really negative and bad to feeling really good, to feeling like, hey, this person's got my back. This person's here for me. I came in upset and they were clearly willing to work with me and help me and get me whatever I need in order to make me happy, right? And that, of course, is what the clients are paying us for. Sometimes I think, and I'll again be honest and admit that sometimes I think I forget that, I'm here to make the client's life easier, not the other way around. But sometimes I find myself acting and reacting in a way that's consistent with the opposite. Like I'm expecting the client to make my life easier. I want them to make it easy for me to get what I need so I can do the job they hired me to do. And the truth is that's not how this works. I mean, yes, I want to set up the systems that make it easy for the client to make it easy for me, right? And that's kind of an important flow to follow, right? It's again, it's not the opposite, but I think sometimes, especially when we get comfortable with clients we've been working with for a while, that tends to be the fallback is, we get annoyed when the clients aren't making it easy for us. And the reality is we're supposed to make it easy for the clients, right? So when I think about how to accelerate your accounting or bookkeeping, I get a pretty specific idea now, given the context I've just laid out, of what that looks like. But I want you to think about that for a minute. What does this look like for you? And if you've accelerated your own accounting or bookkeeping practice, what's that going to look like, right? And that's what I really want you to kind of pause for a moment right here, right now, and think about. If you have some kind of a note-taking app or good old-fashioned pen and paper handy, jot down some notes. This is a perfect time to do it, even if just to write down that question. What does an accelerated accounting or bookkeeping practice look like for me? And really try and visualize the end result, right? Because after thinking about this for a while myself, I said, well, for me, this means I love working with my clients and they in turn love working with me. It means I'm excited to work with them. And when they reach out to me, I can't wait for the meeting because I can't wait for them to, I can't wait for the opportunity to work with them and help them with whatever it is that they need. And in many respects, these clients should become my best friends because I'm handling one of the most intimate areas of their lives, right? And imagine putting your trust in somebody to handle the most intimate area of your life, your finances, and then have them clearly seem reluctant in wanting to help you when you're asking for their help. It's not going to feel good, right? It's not going to feel good to your client. And like I said, as much as you might think you're good at covering up your feeling of being annoyed with them, I guarantee you they're feeling it in some way, shape, or form, if not consciously, subliminally for sure. And it's going to make them hesitant. Think about how that's going to make them feel, assuming it does come to the extreme level of consciousness that you're clearly, maybe even visibly annoyed that you have to take time out of your day to spend with them. And that's not what the relationship should look like, right? So again, what does it look like for you when you have an accelerated accounting or bookkeeping practice? Think about the relationship that you have with your clients, and what does it look like when the client reaches out and says, hey, can we schedule a Zoom? I need your help with something. Or worse, hey, I don't think I'm getting what I've paid for here. We need to talk, right? And you want to, instead of reacting to that and getting defensive, which is it's the human condition. Our default go-to is going to be to get defensive. Like, hey, you just called my baby ugly. I'm going to defend that, but instead turn around and say, hey, of course, I'm sorry that you're, feeling frustrated, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix that, to turn that around. Of course, underneath all of that is the assumption that everybody's being reasonable. But my experience is if you're reasonable with your clients, even if they're not reasonable at first, they'll come around and they'll be reasonable. Most of the time, most people just want to know that you're there for them and that you've got their back and that you're willing to help them, right? So ultimately, like I said, in many respects, the accelerated accounting or bookkeeping practice, from my perspective, what that looks like is, again, they become my best friend. I become their best friend because we're working together to handle the most intimate part of their lives. I'll share with you a very direct and current experience I had along these lines with a client whom I meet with every single week. Usually it's just for a half an hour, and we just quickly review some reports that are automatically sent to him through QuickBooks Online every week. And we just go through them together, and he kind of spot checks them and makes sure, as the business owner who knows his daily operations, he makes sure there's nothing standing out in any of these reports that doesn't look right. And I'll just make notes and indicate what things I might need to look into over the course of the next week before our next meeting. And recently, especially, during this time, I've given him a lot of extra time, way above and beyond, what I had sort of structured things around. And in one particular case, it was a Sunday, actually, that I got on work with him. I normally never talk to clients on a Sunday. That time, the weekend, Saturday and Sunday are sacred. But I gave him the time because he really needed some help, and it had to do with filling out financial aid applications for his kids to go to the private schools that they go to. And you know, I spent like 5 hours with him in one call and several other calls that went beyond our normal half hour to help him compile the information he needed about his financials to, you know, to get this financial aid. And he's been hit hard by COVID-19, and he shared with me yesterday on our call, he showed me the two screens that for to each of his kids, because of the help I gave him, he was able to get almost $13,000 per kid in financial aid, which really will go a long way to helping him. To me, that's what these relationships need to look like, right? He was so grateful and so appreciative of the time, and he acknowledged it. He says, I know you spent a lot of extra time with me. I just wanted you to know, you know, here's what you helped me to do, right? And that's a lot of money that I helped him save by getting that financial aid for his kids. And it's very important to him. You know, it's very important to him that his kids be able to go to these private schools. They're getting, in his view, a better education than they'd be getting in public schools, to be sure. And again, it was very important to him. So, so with that in mind, you know, ultimately the level of service I'm giving my clients should be so mind-blowing that they can't imagine working with anyone else, right? Not only that, but it should go a step beyond that. It should be a situation where they can't help but brag to their other colleagues, other business owners, other people they could ultimately be referring to you, that they can't help but brag to them about what an amazing accountant or bookkeeper they have. To me, that's what it should look like when I've successfully accelerated my accounting or bookkeeping practice. My clients become my sales force because they can't help but rave about what an amazing asset I am in their lives, what an amazing resource I am. So with that in mind, what I want to do is I want to talk for the rest of the hour about, you know, let's design a service based on this, and you're not allowed to think about the price yet, because that's what I think we do. A lot of us start off thinking about the price, and this is something else I was thinking about when I was kind of, you know, writing the outline for today. And I said, you know, how can we possibly place a value on something if we haven't defined it yet, right? And I think we tend to do that. We tend to put the value first, and then underneath that, we can start trying to define what we're offering underneath each of those values. But I honestly think that's backwards. I think we need to design the service first, then decide how much is that worth, right? And then we could scale it down or sideways or whatever we need to do to break off the other options that we're going to offer people. But let's assume money is no object, and let's design the ultimate accounting or bookkeeping service, and then we can price it once we have a clear picture of what that's going to look like for the client, right? So next question, what do clients want, right? We immediately go to, oh, well, I'm going to reconcile your bank, and we start going right into the trenches before we've gotten a look at what the big picture looks like, right? The end result, you know, what do the clients want at the end of the day? They don't care about bank reconciliations. Half the clients don't even know really what that means. You know, I worked with a business owner just yesterday who was, you know, using QuickBooks Online as a bit of a check register, and she was really just recording her receivables and tracking her sales, and she wasn't minding the expense side too much. And so I started walking through with her how to reconcile her bank accounts, and it was clearly the first time she had been exposed to this process, and it's not like I was the first accountant she came to. So clients don't really care what reconciliation is. They do care about the end result of the reconciliation. They care about the fact that the reason we reconcile their statements is because we want to be able to provide them with accurate data, right? We want to be able to show them a balance sheet that when they look at that balance sheet and they see what it says their balances are in their bank accounts and their credit card accounts, we want to know that they can look at that and with confidence they can confirm, yeah, that looks right. If I go online and look at those accounts, that's about what we have, right? Might be off by a couple of days, might be off by some uncleared checks if they're actually, you know, say printing checks out of QuickBooks Online. You know, that should be the only difference between what we have in QuickBooks and what's actually in the account. So they want data. That was my ultimate answer to the question of what do clients want? They want data. And I get it. That's very broad in general, but that's where we need to start, right? So let's dig a little deeper on that and say that what they really want is they want access to real-time information so they can clearly understand what's going on in their business, right? So having accurate bank and credit card balance is only a part of it. It's just the beginning. We know as accountants and bookkeepers that that is the foundation, right? They don't necessarily understand or care. What they care about is the end result. What am I able to do with that data? First, they need to have the confidence that comes with being able to look at those numbers and agree that it's accurate. If they don't feel it's accurate, we either need to find out what's wrong and fix it, or prove to them that it's right, right? So in the end, how do we get them that real-time information so they can clearly understand what's going on in their business? And, how do we get that to them? And I came up with a very succinct answer that can be summed up in a single word. One word. Can anybody guess? Give me one word that will describe how we get the clients that real-time data that's going to help them clearly understand what's going on in their business. Don't forget to unmute if you're answering, or post it in the chat. And meanwhile, I'm going to read Mariette's comment. All right, no answers. All right, fair enough. So in one word, the way I sum up, Josh says, what was the question? The question was, in one word, how do we get the clients the data that they're looking for, which I've just defined as, the data that's going to give them access to real-time information so they clearly understand what's going on in their business. How, not what, but how do we get that to them? In one word. Mariette gave me 2 words. She said leverage tech. That's definitely a part of it.
Communication.
Communication is very close. Very close, actually. What is communication representative of that I'm actually giving them when I'm communicating well with them?
Interpretation.
Again, very close.
Asking questions.
Asking questions might be how I get there.
Information.
Now at least we're thinking. People are answering and thinking. So I've woken you up. I've given you your coffee, right? We're getting very close. It's not a trick question. When I say it, you're going to be like, oh my God.
Give a hint.
Again, it's what you said, Joshua. Communication is very much representative of what happens when we're giving them the word that I'm looking for.
Listen. Listen.
Again, very close. Before I can communicate with them, what does that mean I have to do to them or for them? What do I have to pay them? There's a very obvious hint.
Attention.
There we go. Thank you. Attention, right? And I wanted to drag that out a bit because I really wanted
paying attention to you.
What? Yeah, nobody was paying attention to me, exactly. So attention, right? That's the key word right there. And back of that, of course, is the fact that I have to care, right? Because if I don't care, first of all, I'm dead in the water. There's no point even going any further with this. So the assumption is that we care. And then in order to get them that real-time data, I need to pay attention to them. And I think that's where we immediately fall short in a lot of cases. And again, I'm saying this as much for myself as anyone else. I'm guilty of it, especially on the lower tier clients. Those lower tier sort of services are almost based on unlimited attention, right? They're based on the fact that I'm just going to download code, reconcile, and if they want, I can automate reports in QBO that'll get sent to them. But really then I'm paying very little attention to them, and the business owner is going to get these reports and they may very well not even really know what to do with them, or they may look at them and not really understand them, right? So I have to pay attention. I have to be willing to pay attention, which is why I wanted to head this whole thing off with the idea that we're going to forget about price for a minute, because what's the price? What's the value of your attention, right? That's one of the key things to think about. And then, of course, the follow-up question of that is, how much attention can I afford to pay this person? Well, how much are they willing to pay me for that attention, right? That's the key. And that's why I said that we need to ignore the price for a minute, right? And let's assume that we want to pay as much attention as we need to get them that real-time information so they can clearly understand what's going on in their business, right? And so how do we pay attention to clients? So that's the next question. How do I do that? What does that look like, right? And I'm looking in the chat. Josh says I'm too broke to pay attention. And then Omar says, LOL, good thing we're not on Family Feud. Mariette says, you can definitely pay money attention, but I also want cold hard cash. Thanks for waking us up. So yeah, of course, that was, that's the point. We have to define what that's going to look like coming the other way. What are we going to ask them for in terms of what they're going to pay us in exchange for our attention? What's the value of my attention? I only have so much of it. I only have so much time in the day, and that time has to be divided up amongst a lot of things, including potentially a lot of different clients. Of course, then the way we scale is by hiring people so that we can spread that attention out. I can't pay all the attention to everyone. That's why I hire people at some point when I outgrow what I can do on my own, right? So how do we pay attention to clients? Let's take it from the top. The very first thing is organization, right? We've got to get organized. We've got to be ridiculously organized, especially in a time like this where we can actually scale quite a bit without having to hire anybody and go to that expense. I can use technology, going back to Mariette's comment from earlier, I can use technology to leverage myself to get information flowing more efficiently, automatically even, right? So the first step is we've got to get organized. And I've seen people who run firms talk about having a team to work on a single client. And I'm going to just go straight out there and say I think that's a big mistake. And I'll explain why. And I'm not saying there can't be multiple people working on a client, but I think it's a big mistake in terms of the fact that at least at the top, there should be one person running that client from A to Z. Otherwise, it's disconnected, which makes it very difficult to pay attention and see things from all sides. So there needs to be one person at the top managing that client. If the job with respect to what you're doing for that client gets so big, you might need to hire other people, but there's got to be one person. In other words, you can't have 5 people and one's working on AP and one's working on AR and another one's doing bank recs, and there's no one sort of above that managing the whole process, right? There needs to be one person at the top of the pyramid of the organization around what you're doing to manage that client. And in the beginning, when you're smaller, it's probably just going to be one person managing every aspect of that client. At first, it was me. When I hired the first person, I basically handed off the whole client to that person. I worked with them, paid them more attention at the beginning to make sure they understood, everything that I was doing for the client so I could properly hand it off to them. Right. So we need one person managing that whole client from A to Z, and then if necessary, leveraging their time by enlisting the help of others. But there's got to be at least that one person who can see the whole picture for that client. So you can have a manager maybe, and then you're going to have the staff who's doing the day-to-day work in the trenches, right? And that's only as you grow, right? When we're smaller, it's all going to be just us. So like I said, if you have it broken up, then it's disconnected, and it's not even difficult. It's impossible to see things from all sides. Now, next thing is, in my experience, the best way to stay on top of clients, especially when you have a lot of them, is that for each client, you have a set scheduled weekly time when you will work on them. So this client, I work on Wednesdays from 9 to 12, whatever I think it's going to take. And obviously, in the beginning, I might miss the mark in terms of how much time it takes. So I adjust, and I do what I have to do. In the beginning, you're always going through a learning phase where you're figuring out exactly what that takes. Plus, you're scaling, because in the beginning, it's going to take more time because you're developing the systems and figuring out how to get everything to work with that client. As time goes on, it should take less and less time, again, especially as we're leveraging technology and using apps and things to get this stuff done more efficiently, right? So again, plus what this does, and you're going to see as I go on, how this comes up and becomes incredibly useful in many ways, especially because what you're doing is you're building kind of a cornerstone that you're working off of when you're building the structure in terms of how you work with your clients. That becomes a cornerstone unto itself. Is I know that this client gets worked on every Wednesday at 9 a.m., right? And you'll see how that's going to come back later to help us in a lot of ways, right? And of course, you still need to check in at other times. There's no question about that. The client's going to be reaching out to you throughout the week and say, hey, I've got a question about this. Can you help me with that, right? But the thing is, having that one set time gives you the assurance that as those things come up, you can simply add them into, and I'm going to use ClickUp, of course, as the example, because as you all well know, I think by now that's my favorite project management app in the world. And so if things come up, if they send me an email, if they send me a Slack message, I have systems around how I can easily get those things added into ClickUp as a task. And so I know that the next time I hit that time of the week when it's time to work on that client, I'm going to have that there, because that's part of my process. Is now every Wednesday at 9 o'clock when I'm working on that client, the first thing I do is go into ClickUp and I look at that list of tasks that I might have accumulated throughout the past week since the last time I worked on them. And I know I'm not going to drop any balls because it's all going to be there, right? And before I get started on working on that client that day, I might just scan my inbox for any emails that are still sitting in there from that client that I hadn't yet added into ClickUp. You know, so again, I can build processes around giving myself the maximum amount possible of assurance that I haven't missed anything or dropped any balls, right? So having that kind of cornerstone in the foundation of how I work with clients, it relieves me of a lot of stress because I'm not sitting there worried about how am I going to remember to do everything I need to do for that client. I have a system for that. I have a set weekly time. I'm going to hit that client every single week, at least once a week. And at that time, I'm going to go through all the stuff that I've bookmarked in terms of what I need to follow up on for that client, right? So this is how you make sure that you don't drop any balls, right? Now let's talk about two different kinds of attention. We have direct attention, right? So what does direct attention look like? Well, there's weekly meetings in the beginning, right? When I onboard a new client, I am meeting with that client every week, once a week for at least an hour, going through where we're at in terms of setup and catch up and any cleanup that we might be doing, which is almost always going to be the case, right? And making sure that I haven't forgotten. A lot of times these meetings are incredibly useful for me because it gives the client an opportunity to say, oh yeah, what about this? And oh yeah, what about that? And and while I'm in that meeting, I'm taking notes, right? So of course I'm doing those meetings in Zoom, so we get to look at each other. And some of my clients don't turn their cameras on. That's okay. I don't need to be able to trust them in a manner of speaking. It's more important to me that they can see, that they can look me in the eyes and see that they can trust me, right? Having that face-to-face, doing it in Zoom is an important part of how we build trust. It's the next best thing to sitting in an office physically with the person, right? So I turn my camera on, I use Zoom, I make sure they can see me and see my facial expressions as I'm talking to them and going through things with them. It's an important trust building part of the process. So we use Zoom, and that's how we do the meetings. And while we're in the meetings, I'm taking notes, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes how ClickUp makes this incredibly easy to do now. Let's see, then as we're taking those notes, or after the meeting, I can go through those notes, and then I can carve tasks out of those notes, and then I can delegate them. So, because in my case, I'm usually managing these clients, and then I have a bookkeeper who's working on the client. So during these meetings, we carve out the notes and create tasks where we need to make sure that we follow up on anything that came up, you know, that shows up in the notes from that meeting. And so we create tasks, I create tasks and I delegate, right? And then after a while, you know, the bookkeeper who's working on the client, I don't even need to create the tasks for them. We have the notes, they're shared in ClickUp. Again, I'm going to show you this in a couple minutes. And they can look through their own notes and create their own tasks and delegate. I believe in giving the people whom I've put my trust in, the people that I've hired to work on the clients, a ton of autonomy. I don't want to have to micromanage people. I would rather pay them more money so that I don't have to micromanage them, so that I hire adults who can handle their own business. And that's the way I sincerely look at that. If I have to micromanage somebody, it's hurting me. It's not helping me. And when I hire somebody, it should be that they help me. They should be making this easier for me. In a sense, it's like I'm their client, right? Years ago as an employee, I started thinking of it that way. That's how I actually transitioned myself into starting and building my own business. As many years ago when I was still employed at a big publicly traded company, I started just changing my own perspective, just sort of in my head and thinking, what if this company were my client and I was really just hired to provide a service to them? And in reality, isn't that what every employee really is? It's somebody who's hired to provide a service. It's just the relationship looks a little different, but in reality, that's exactly what's going on. So when I hire somebody, that's how I look at it. And I want them to be very independent and very autonomous. And I'm there, if anything, as a support resource to them so that if they get stuck on something, I can certainly help them, right? But after a meeting and after I've worked with, you know, one of my bookkeepers for a little while, I should be able to trust that they're going to be in the meeting with me, with the client, that they can go through the notes that we've both taken and they can carve out the tasks and get things done, right? So that's the direct attention, is having regular meetings, weekly in the beginning for our client, and then probably at least monthly after that. Again, we're holding the cost of this aside. We're not considering what the price of all this is just yet. Because like I said before, we first have to have it clearly defined what we're going to do before we can place a value on it, right? So that's what we're doing. We're defining what this whole service is going to look like so that we can then place a value on it. What is this worth, right? So that's the direct attention, is weekly meetings, specifically and directly joining live with them and giving them direct attention. Then the rest is what I call indirect attention, right? And what that looks like is I have Slack. right? So Slack is a way that I can give them a way to be and feel like they have constant access to me. And one important thing on this, because this is where I think a lot of us kind of hesitate or balk at the idea of giving a dedicated Slack workspace to each client, which to me is the only way to use Slack with a client. I've had this conversation many times on the internet with people, where if you're going to do one Slack workspace and each client gets their own private channel, you might as well use WhatsApp or just text them, right? Because there's no way to organize within that. The whole point of having a tool like Slack is that when you have a dedicated workspace, I can organize the conversations. I have a channel for banking, and I'm going to show you this in a few minutes, right? We're going to look at ClickUp and Slack together in just a few minutes, because those are the key tools we're going to use in facilitating how we give clients this attention, right? And that's the key word for the day, is attention. So hopefully you have that on a note-keeping app somewhere with H1 tags on it, right? So again, we use Slack to give them a way to be and feel like they have constant access to me. But one thing that's really important, and this is where I think we get stuck or worried or scared about the idea of doing this for clients, is we start to think, now that they have Slack, I have to respond the second they message me. So really important, I want you to put this in all caps, the word important with an exclamation mark. You do not need to respond to things immediately. One business turnaround time is more than reasonable. And here it comes. I told you earlier that the regular weekly scheduled thing was going to come back. And this is a key to how it comes back and how it relieves stress, right? Because again, you do not need to respond to things immediately. One business day turnaround time on responding is more than reasonable. And it is perfectly acceptable to respond and say, hey, I'll be working on your stuff at, and insert your regularly scheduled day and time, and I'll handle this then. That puts them on notice that you haven't ignored them. It shows that you're paying attention to them. And it also gives them the opportunity to say, hey, if you don't mind, I need this sooner. You know, this one is urgent. I get it. Normally I'm happy to wait, and the way you deliver is very reasonable. But if you don't mind, and hopefully they're that polite about it. If they're not that polite about it, that's another conversation. But the idea is you're communicating with them, right? And this way, again, it gives them the opportunity to let you know if for some reason it's a priority and if they haven't already, they might in their initial message say, hey, if you don't mind, I really need this tomorrow. I need documentation for my PPP loan, for my poop loan, right? So having that regularly scheduled day and time, again, relieves a lot of stress, because now you have a fallback anytime you're responding to a client to let them know, hey, here's when I'm going to work on this, right? And clients really appreciate that. Okay, next, and again, I'm going to show you an example of what I'm about to explain clearly, and I brought this up actually recently in another Zoom that we did in ClickUp. But in addition to Slack, because every client is different and they work differently, what you can do is you can offer them some kind of a ticketing system, which in simple terms means you can give them some kind of a form they can fill out whenever they need to request something of you, right? So let's say something comes up during their week and they need a report, right? Maybe they're trying to get a loan, whatever it is, give them an easy way. It could be Slack. Slack might take care of this, but separate from Slack, in addition to, you might consider giving them some kind of a ticketing system where at some point in the onboarding process, you say, here's a link, bookmark this. If you lose track of it, just ask me, I'll give it to you again. And when you click on this link, it's a simple form you can fill out where you can let me know of anything that you need to request of me, right? This is also getting them out of the habit of emailing you, because email is such an inefficient form of communication these days, right? So between Slack and giving them a ticketing system, and again, I'm going to show you what this looks like in a few minutes, you can get completely out of the email jungle and into two different environments between Slack and ClickUp, which is where the ticketing system is going to get built. So that they can communicate directly with you, and you don't have to worry about all the spam that shows up in your email inbox and having to weed through that to get to the important stuff. What you're doing is building systems that proactively carve the important stuff out of your inbox from the get-go, right? And it makes your process 1,000 times more efficient, because I can ignore my email for a whole day right now. And the only reason I don't is because the only thing I'll miss if I do that that's really important are emails from potential new clients, from prospects, right? So for the most part, my inbox is just a marketing tool now where I'm looking for the inquiries from potential new clients, because all the existing clients are communicating with me pretty much in Slack, right? And then I can give them something like this ticketing system, which I'll show you. so that that's yet another way that if the client is not tech savvy or for any reason they don't want to go into Slack, and you can have a Slack channel specifically for like a ticketing request kind of thing. But anyway, point being, it's another way that, and as I said in the very beginning of the hour, it's another way for you to make your client's life easier, which remember, that's the job here. Our job is to make their life easy, not the other way around, okay? Last thing, and then I'm going to get into kind of demonstrating, the on-screen portion of how we're going to create this attention for the clients, right? So the ticketing system, again, makes it easy for the client to request reports or bring up issues. And using ClickUp for this, the requests come in directly as tasks, which can be assigned by default and then delegated if and as needed once they've been assigned, right? So last piece, review, catch, and correct, right? This is key, right? In any process, when I worked as an auditor 100 years ago, we had a whole review process. I was staff auditor. I would do the work. I had a supervisor who would review my work, catch any mistakes, and give me review notes, right? Those review notes would come in the form of a checklist. I would check things off and initial them as I got them done, turn it back over to the supervisor. The supervisor would review it once more and then turn it over to the manager, who would review it once more. And then the manager would kick review notes down to the supervisor, which could in turn kick review notes back down to me. So there was a multi-tiered review process, and the point of it was to catch and correct any problems, any issues. And it's key because no matter how well organized you think you are, you will drop a ball here and there, and you will make mistakes. I guarantee it, right? We all will, because all of us are only human, right? Even with AI and apps and automated systems, we can easily make a mistake or overlook something that we didn't count on in setting up those processes. So the bottom line is, you make the plan and you execute the plan, and then you expect the plan to go off the rails, and understand that you don't know what that's going to look like when the plan does go off the rails. So you have systems to catch and correct, to fix those things as they come up, which means we need a review process, right? And that review process in the simplest way can look like simply doing my little internal review process that I've illustrated many times. It's clearly illustrated in the Bulletproof Bookkeeping course, where you're going through the balance sheet line by line and then going through the P&L line by line, drilling into each account, organizing the details in whatever way is needed so you can get clear visibility into what's in there, and then analyze it and make the decision, is there anything in here that doesn't belong? And more importantly, and harder to catch, is thinking about things that are missing, right? Looking for things that should be there and aren't, right? And looking for clues, becoming a detective. If I see interest expense, there should be a loan, right? Or there could be a credit card. But when I see interest expense on the P&L, I should be thinking, where are the related items that I should see on the balance sheet that created this interest, right? That's how we start connecting dots when we do this review process. And that's how we help catch and correct problems. So those are the keys, right? We pay the client attention, we give them direct attention and then indirect attention, which in simple terms, ways to communicate with us, right? That was Josh's first answer, was communication. Communication is the result or the process by which I facilitate that attention, right? I pay attention to them by communicating with them. That's why I'd said that first answer was very, very close, right? But it skipped that initial step of paying attention. And then once I'm paying attention, next comes the communication. So let's take a look once again at my sandbox client in ClickUp. Okay, and I showed this, I forget how long ago it was, not that long ago, right? Where in ClickUp you can build a form like this, and I call it client tickets, right? And I capture the full name because I need to know who is making the request. It might be the client, it might be a staff member of that client's, right? I capture their email. This is set up as a custom field. Okay, the task name is actually the title. So they're going to make the request here, right? The task description is where they enter text to give me the description, right? And then, of course, the start date would be usually the date they've made the request, the due date, but I let them choose. Maybe it's something they need me to start on next week, so I let them decide. And I give them an attachment field so they can upload any attachments that might be relevant and helpful. So it's a very simple form. And then we click the share button and I can embed it, right? Or I can just give them a direct link. All right, so if I copy this, let's see what the form actually looks like on the front end. So I give this link to the client, and again, it's a very simple, straightforward form. Client tickets, task us, request reports, request a meeting, anything you need. This is how you can let us know what you need and when you need it, right? So they enter their full name, their email, their task name, description, right? Start date, due date. So let me just fill this out.
Hey, Seth, while
Yep.
you're filling it out, what are a couple other options of creating these client tickets other than ClickUp? I love this idea.
Any form building tool, you can use Google Forms. I like ClickUp because, like I said, if I'm using ClickUp to manage my tasks, this will, as you're going to see in a minute, drop in as a task. So I don't have to do any extra work to get it into my project management system, right? This to me is good and efficient. But yeah, if you're not using ClickUp or for some reason you just want to use a different tool, any form building tool, Smartsheet, Airtable, Google Forms, any of those, anything that lets you create a form can work for this. But if you're not using this, remember that you have to consider how you're going to get that data from wherever these form results go into a place where you can take action.
All right, that's what I was thinking. What about something as simple as sticking that form request into a Slack request?
Sticking that form request, yeah, you could use Zapier or something to zap that into Slack. I don't love Slack for organizing that kind of stuff because Slack is not linear. It's gonna. I think my expectation would be that it will start getting clunky in Slack and hard to kind of follow up and see which of these things have I dealt with and which ones haven't I dealt with. That's my only concern about using Slack for that piece of things.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
But like I said, what you could do, and I've kind of done versions of this, is I can use a channel in Slack, or generally speaking, when somebody goes into, let's say, the banking channel and says, hey, I've got a problem with my bank balance, I've created a zap that if I click what used to be starred, now it's called saved in Slack. I have a zap that says anytime I mark something saved, Zap will grab that Slack information, including the URL that points back to that exact Slack message, and it will create a task in ClickUp for me. And that URL will go in the description. So now I've got a reminder in ClickUp to follow up on that thing because I found out that I was terrible at following up on those things that I had starred or marked saved in Slack. And so this way it goes into ClickUp where I know I am paying attention. And then in the description of that task in ClickUp is the link so that once I do whatever follow-up I need to do, and it might just be going back in and writing a reply, I can click right on that link. That link is going to launch my browser for a second, which is going to ask me if I want to open up Slack. When I confirm, it's going to take me right back to that exact message, no matter how long it's been, and I can hit the reply option in Slack and write my reply to them and then mark that task complete in ClickUp.
There's also an integration between Slack and ClickUp, so you can do something very similar and you can put it right into the client's specific space or folder or whatever you want to put that in.
So one caveat on that, because I played with that last week, you are only able to connect one Slack workspace to your ClickUp team. I emailed support to make sure I had that right, and they confirmed yes, and we're aware it's not the best workflow yet, but obviously it's brand new, and I'm sure they'll get that fixed so that you can link multiple Slack workspaces. Right now you only get one, which means you would have to do that in like your main firm workspace, if anything, so that from there it could be redistributed.
Yeah, that's actually where I have it right now. I haven't gotten around to hooking it up with the other ones, but
right.
I guess I would run across that problem when I
Yep. So task name, get me this report. Task description, I need reports for my poop loans. Start date is today. Due date is today. I need it all right now. And then again, I can easily browse and, attach files. And I'll click submit. Oh crap, I've got to fix that. Apparently the attachment field is required. So let me just attach a dumb file here somewhere. What can I pick on here?
Greg's face is a dumb file.
What?
My face is a dumb file.
We'll attach Greg. Perfect.
I don't know whether I should be honored or horrified that you have a picture of me.
Well, no, we talked about this. I used that recently. That's why it was still sitting in there. So now this I realize confuses some people because I had this come up recently. So when you click on it, I think I did this just because this was like the demo space that I was using for these Zooms. So you can configure a redirect on that form. So if I give you the link so you can play with this, you'll get redirected to the 97 and up page so that you'll be encouraged to join 97 and up. See, I'm always thinking. And over here in the back end is where I chose that I created a list called tickets, and that's where the form is configured to save the tasks to. It's automatically going to assign the task to me. I can use a template to create a task, which I've not chosen to do, and there's that redirect URL, right? So I'm going to share this link in the Zoom chat here so that you can all give me tasks to work on. Where's my chat? Oh boy, I can never find it. It's buried behind my screens. Hold on, I'm going to just minimize everything. There it is. It was behind a window as usual. All right, so you can task me now with that. That'll take you right over to the form. Give me some tasks to do. While you're doing that, let's go back into my ClickUp screen. And if I go into tickets now, there's a brand new task. And it goes in, and I set up the statuses for this. So it comes in with the title that the client gave it when they filled it out, right? I can click on this. There's the attachment. Of course, now that I'm starting it, I can click here and change it to WIP or work in process, right? And what I love about this is over here, I can make notes, right? And so I can say, okay, you know, I can make a checklist, right? I can say balance sheet, right? P&L, statement of cash flows, everything I need. I can highlight these. When I highlight text in the description, it gives me the WYSIWYG editor. I can make a checklist out of that so I can check things off. I can also add a checklist sort of more globally to the task. It has a checklist option, and of course there are subtasks. Why would you do one versus the other? They behave a little differently, that's all. Checklist is kind of more simple, where I can just list the things I need to make sure I do, and as I get them done, I can check them off, and it's very nice and visual, right? It always feels good to check something like that off, and it doesn't sort of disappear on me. It's there, and very easy, by the way, when I do it as a checklist, right? And watch this trick. I always forget to show this, but to me, this is super cool. So I'm going to highlight these all and press Control-C, and then let's add a checklist. And the checklist name is going to be reports to get. Okay, I'll create the checklist. Okay, and then here now I have the first new item, but I can paste all three of those. And ClickUp is smart. It says, hey, I detect multiple lines. And right here I can say, create 3 checklists items, and boom. So again, when you take the time to learn how to use these tools, it gets super efficient because there's some really cool stuff under the hood that it does. And then if this is something that for some reason I want to reuse, notice as I check them off, they go here to this completed queue, which I can click on to reveal them. And then up here on the ellipsis, I can easily say uncheck all. We were just recently talking about that on the 97 and up call recently about how there's different versions of how to deal with this, like I said. So I like that I can quickly uncheck them all so I can maybe change the due date and reuse this task, you know, for something else at some other time, right? With the subtasks, the difference is I can't check or uncheck them all, but I can batch update, right? So I'm going to create 3 subtasks. What I can do here is next to the 3 subtasks, I can select all, and here I can batch update their status. So I can mark them all done or mark them all unstarted or anything in between, right? So that's one of the main differences between how subtasks will behave versus checklist items. I can dismiss this. The other key is with a subtask, I can click into a subtask and I get the full task level dialog, one more level down. So if I need to get very detailed about what I'm doing with this balance sheet, I can do that when I set it up as a subtask, right? So those are just to highlight some of the main differences between checklists and subtasks. So again, using this, and this is, assume this is a client, Sandbox Inc., Greg Cullup, right? So, and that's how I always name things. It's company name and then the main client contact name, you know, inside the name. Because sometimes I might be looking for Sandbox when I'm in a search, and sometimes I might be looking for Greg. You know, it just depends on how I got to the point where I want to look for that client's information to do the follow-up that I need to do, right? So again, that ticketing system is huge. Let's go to Slack, right? And I know most of you by now hopefully have seen Slack, right? So I'm just going to go, I have a sample Slack workspace, and I invited a few of my 97 and up friends into this morning. Okay, so we've got Josh and Courtney and Greg in here. I invited a few others, but they might not have gotten the memo yet because I just did it this morning. So in the Slack workspace, like I said, we're doing a dedicated Slack workspace for every client. And then I start kind of following suit with the balance sheet in terms of how I set up the channel. So we've got a banking channel. We've got an accounts receivable channel. And I've shown this a number of times before because this has come up with clients. And this, of course, is the beauty of it is, when I'm working in here, here's an example of how I'm able to link straight to an invoice form to show the client how to add lines in this case, right? So the client might say, hey, because sometimes we miss these little subtle things. For the longest time, I missed the fact that this add subtotal option was right there. And I thought QuickBooks Online still hadn't had the subtotal option in there. And then someone said, oh, no, it's right there where add lines is. And I'm like, oh, duh. And then I might need, let's say my client's biggest client of their own is sort of worthy of their own channel because there's a lot to talk about with respect to that. So I have AR-client X. So if we need to focus on a more detailed level on a particular client, we can do that. And then, of course, if this reaches a point where it's no longer an issue, I can go into the details here, and I can archive the channel. If I go to additional options, there's the archive option. So I can say, let's archive this channel. I can always bring it back if I need it again. This keeps it out of the way. Of course, I can just leave the channel and not be in there, right? And then again, just like with ClickUp, I want to learn how to use the tools. So the general channel is the channel that everybody's going to join by default. And by the way, that's an option I can set up, in the Slack workspace preferences. I can decide which channels are automatically joined by people who join the Slack workspace, the first time. But what I've done is I've developed a workflow where if I add a new channel for something, I'll go into the general channel and I'll say, hey, new channel added for, and hashtag AR. And as I start typing after the hashtag, it starts giving me the options, right? When I click on that and hit enter, that becomes hyperlinked. So now Josh and Courtney can click in there and join that channel. When you click on it, it takes you right over. I'm already in. For them, it'll take them over and give them an option to join the channel right at the bottom here. And if you guys can do that real quick, we'll see how you come into the channel. And there I got the notification. Courtney messaged me. So go ahead and click on that hyperlink channel name. Right, and there it shows me. So I rejoined. I guess I had left it or something. AR client, also Greg Cullup joined. And there it is there. So that's my way of letting people know there's a new channel to join in case it's something that's important to them, right? It's very easy to create channels. You click or tap here, right? You can browse channels, browsing channels. You'll want to filter it for channels you don't belong to. Hide my channels, meaning it's only going to show me channels that I don't belong to, right? So now I can clearly see I belong to all the channels. So that's a quick way of seeing, are there any channels I don't belong to yet that I should, right? Status updates is something I create just for like general, updates like, hey, it's a good day, almost like water cooler chat, and you should make these things fun. It shouldn't be all serious, right? So that's why I usually leave the random channel in there. And I also, if it's not there by default, but when you go into the settings, when you're setting up a Slack workspace, you can add the Giphy app. It just makes it fun that I can put GIFs in there and sort of communicate, that way and express my mood or whatever it is I want to do, right? And I want to go back to ClickUp here. So now I've got a new task that somebody's assigned to me.
Seth, back in Slack, is there a way to automatically create all of these channels like in a templated form, or do you have to create them one at a time?
Oh, you mean like when you're setting up a brand new workspace?
Yeah, so
you have to create them. Each workspace is totally independent because each one is on its own subdomain in slack.com. So yeah, there's no way to kind of link them. That would be cool if you could like say, hey, import this channel template. But unfortunately, I don't know of a way that you can do that. I suppose you might be able, I wonder if there's a way to create a Zap, if Zapier has access to that level of Slack's API, where maybe you can create a trigger. It's easy to sort of ad hoc create just some trigger, like checking something off in some other tool that acts as the trigger that says, go into the Slack workspace and add these channels. So that's something to check out, actually, Greg. Let's see if we can make Zapier.
There is a way to create a channel, but I think you have to point it towards an existing workspace. So
Well, yeah. So you have to update the Zap for the new workspace that you want to do it for, and then hit the trigger somehow. So it's one extra step, but it would still save you the trouble of having to individually create all these Slack channels.
Okay.
So you would just, because you only need that once theoretically for any one Slack workspace, so you could just go in there and change the workspace you're using it for. So it's a little manual, but not as manual as creating all the channels that you know you want to have for every new client. All right, so now back over here, and there I'm getting my notifications from Josh. So Mariette has created a task for me. I can move this over to WIP. And by the way, I don't have to move it this way. I love the flexibility that I have here. If I go to a board view, I can see it this way. And now I see the images. There's Greg's beautiful face. And so under Unstarted, here's Mariette's meeting, right? And I can just click and drag this over to the WIP thing here, the work in process. So the board view makes it easy to move things across your workflow, whatever that might look like. Okay, if I go up to the sandbox level, another couple of things that I want to point out to you that I've got here, so this is the folder level, or the space level rather, right? I create a space for each client. That's how I've chosen to organize my ClickUp account. Nice. And the other things I've done here, so this ticketing system is for clients to make requests of me, but we also use Smartsheet as our tool for making requests of clients. And this is going to be configured that only people who have had the Smartsheet project shared with them will have access to this. This is one that we've used in the past, right? And you can see there's some stuff in here that's assigned. So right from within ClickUp, I can access my Smartsheet, and we can mark things done as they're getting done. Nice. And there's the Giphy. And so this is a way that I can, again, the idea, and Greg and I have had a lot of chats about this recently, and a few Zoom sessions where we've geeked out on ClickUp, where we both kind of agreed that we want to make ClickUp the place where we truly live and where our staff truly lives. So Smartsheet is very handy to use this, because Smartsheet now can be configured that if I add a task here and assign it to a client, that client's going to get emailed a notification with a link to click on that they can come right through here and follow up on the task. And then in that way, I can do it right from within here. So I can go, I'm in ClickUp, I go to request for information. So this is my way of making requests of the client, because I'm not going to count on the client responding to a form that I've created in ClickUp. So this is going the other way. This is when I go to the client and say, hey, I need updated logins for Bank of N or whatever it is, right? And then here, when you create what ClickUp calls a document, it's really a notebook. So remember earlier I mentioned, and I'm going to wrap up on this note, I mentioned that almost at the beginning of the hour that one of the ways to pay direct attention to a client is to have weekly meetings in the beginning and then probably monthly after that. And what I'm doing now is I'm keeping those meeting notes right here in ClickUp. So I add a document. I've called it Sandbox Notebook. The first page is a reference page where I've just given myself links to their Google Drive folder, both on the web and locally, and also a link to the Smartsheet workspace, so I can quickly link out to those sources if and when I need to. But notice what I've done here also is I've got another page and a sub page. So I have a page for all the April 2020 meetings. And here's a page with notes from that meeting. You can see I've embedded a PDF in here. So while I'm having that weekly meeting with the client in the beginning, I'm in here taking notes saying, need to look, you all know how to take notes, ... And of course, you have the checklist option here. So I can create checklist items in the notes, and that can be my cue that these are things that need to get converted into tasks later on. Also, ClickUp has this really cool notepad thing here. So this I use a lot when if I get on the phone with a client and I'm on the fly and I just quickly need to bring something up where I can take some notes, I can do that here, right? So I did a one-on-one yesterday with this company, and so I didn't want to take the time to drill into where I normally keep that stuff, because I realized by the time I got on the phone with her, on Zoom with her, I wasn't ready. So I just created a note. These notes can easily be converted into a task. So I can take this note and whatever's inside it, convert it into a task in one click, and all the notes inside will go into the description of that task. So I love their little notepad feature. And by the way, if I'm inside of a note, I can expand this, so that I really have space to work within when I'm working on this note. So love this feature too. So now what I want to encourage you to do is think about all this stuff, all these resources that we're giving clients, which we're creating to make it easy for the clients to have a very clear understanding of everything that's going on in their business, right? So that they have access to the data that they want and truly need. Now you can put a price on this. What is this worth? I think this level of attention for any given client has to be worth at least $1,000 a month, probably $1,500 easily, right? And so this is the level that you'll give to a client for a price like that. And then if a client comes in and says, well, I can only afford $500 a month, then you downgrade the level of attention that they're getting. And that's how I like to gauge my pricing, is how much, because the more attention I'm giving a client, the more of my resources it's using up, whether it's my attention or the attention of one of my staff members, right? Somebody's attention needs to be paid to this client to give them this level of information and resources, right? And the truth is, almost ironically, the higher level of attention I'm giving them based on what they're willing to pay me in fees, the easier my life gets, because I get to employ these resources, which, as you've just seen, substantially automate and centralize the whole process. So it actually makes it easier for me. I'll probably end up spending less time on a $1,500 a month client than I might spend on a $500 a month client. And that actually happened to me when I first started using Slack with clients, because at first I said, I'm only going to give Slack to the higher paying clients. And then I realized Slack is making my life easier. So I started creating it and insisting on using it for all levels of clients, because, like I said, it made my life easier. And oftentimes the clients who didn't recognize that it was making their lives easier because they just weren't familiar with Slack, in every single case, every client I've forced into Slack, even if against their will, every one of those clients eventually got back to me and thanked me for forcing them into Slack, because they were so happy with how efficient and good it made our communications process. And I'm pretty much done on that note, but I'll stick around because everybody's been very quiet. So if anybody's got any questions or thoughts or comments, I am, as always, happy to stick around. No.
Do you have any clients that, like, how do you manage scope creep? I guess that's probably a pretty big question.
Pretty quick, what I'll do, because it is a good question. And what I do is you have to kind of nip that in the bud as early as possible. The second your spidey senses start tingling and saying, hey, this doesn't feel good because it feels like I'm being asked to do more than I'm being paid to do, you have to catch that pretty early on and say something right away and say, hey, look, I'm happy to help you with this, but and you have to be prepared. You just give them an estimate, right? I had a client come to me who clearly thought it should be included in their $250 monthly bookkeeping service. They needed me to do projections because they were thinking about selling their company. And I tried to get them to hire me for $500 a month, and they were like, look, this is a really small business. And I agreed with them. So I said, fine, we'll do it for $250 a month. Then he came to me and said, can you do some projections for us? And I said, sure, I can do a Shark Tank-like projection for you where I can really map out what the ROI is going to look like based on the projected net income and all this fancy stuff. And he said, great. And then we never really took it any further than that. A few weeks later, I get an email from him, or a Slack message actually, saying, hey, can you have that thing done for us by tomorrow? And I'm like, no, because we have to talk about the fee, and the fee is going to be, at least $1,500 for something like this. Normally it would be a lot more, but I understand you guys are small and I'm willing to help and work with you, but this is not being included at $250 a month. I'm sorry. And it's the perfect way to ward off that scope creep, because guess what? He never even responded to me. I guess he realized, okay, yeah, of course there's a cost associated with this, and I need to be prepared to pay it before I go asking for it. And then what that does is it also trains the client and kind of puts them on notice. And the other thing that's helpful is if you have a very clear-cut service engagement agreement that spells out exactly what you're doing. And sometimes it's handy to have a section in there. I've seen this done to me, and I've thought that's really clever, that you actually list, you say something like, here's what's not included in our service, which also puts them on notice that these things can be added on for an additional fee. It's almost like putting marketing into the agreement that they sign with you. So, but that's the very general kind of key right there, is nipping in the bud as quickly as possible and saying, hey, I can do this for you, but it's not included. I got to charge you extra for it.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yep. Anyone else? All right, in that case, I'm going to run and jump and hop and skip to the other 800 things I need to do today. No comments on the Facebook Live feed. Everybody was quiet. That usually means either nobody was paying attention or you were just blown away.
Blown away. I was blown away.
All right,
It was
thank you,
great.
Courtney.
Thank
That
you.
makes me feel better.
I mean, I've got like 4 pages of notes, so there's
Okay,
that.
good. Good. All right.
Blown away.
All right. I hope you're all not just saying that to make me feel good.
No, seriously.
No,
You blew us all away.
Thank you. Thank you. Not bad. Not bad for throwing this together pretty quickly in pretty short order. Very good. Well, you know where to find me if you do think of anything else afterwards. And of course, we'll have another great Zoom next week. And don't forget, every Wednesday, I've got the Bulletproof Bookkeeping webinars, except for the last Wednesday of the month or the fourth Wednesday of the month. That's reserved only for people who've signed up for their Q&A. And if any of you watching this happen to be among the people who signed up for the Bulletproof Bookkeeping bonus program, don't forget our bonus coaching sessions start this coming Monday. And I have a really exciting outline planned for you for that.